Hi, everybody. It's Nosh. So, um, I wanted to take some time and talk a little bit about the game that pulled me into GURPS. And you see it right here, Steve Jackson's man-to-man fantasy combat from GURPS, which was published in 1985. Until this point, uh, like so many of you of my generation, we were playing Dungeons and Dragons. We were playing advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I suspect a lot of us were playing a lot of the various role playing games by TSR, Boot Hill, Gangbusters, I think Top Secret, um, Star Frontiers. And, you know, I've often referred to this as like the golden age of RPGs, but I know others will disagree with that use of that phrase. But it seemed to me that at the time, there was just so many games that were coming out um, left, right, and center, and we were buying up as much as we could to play them as much as we could. I realized that right now we're seeing a whole uh, treasure trove of new games coming out. So that's just awesome in and of itself. But I want to leap back to 1985, and I think that one of the things that dissatisfied me about the D20 system and the particular way in which armor class and the damage rolls were done in let's just call it Dungeons and Dragons combat was that it just didn't seem to me to be particularly lethal. And even most recently, in playing in a person-to-person game of 5th edition D&D, we had a fairly high-level thief who dished out a ungodly amount of damage on some undead creature, and it was so obvious that you know the dungeon master uh, was not necessarily prepared to see the undead person or creature be vanquished because this thief just poured on a ton of hit points of damage. And so even today, sometimes I think you know this question of well, what is the top end of the hit points that any creature can really sustain, and you dish it out and you dish it out and you dish it out, and yeah, now maybe it was just the DM's decision that he wanted us to not win this fight. But I think even in 1985 or the early 80s, I was even as a teenager a little disenchanted with the mm, disingenuousness of the combats that were being played. And as I started to at that time get into the interest of the say the damage effects of bullets and crossbow bolts and arrows and all that sort of stuff, which of course now on YouTube is just taken to a whole different level with ballistic effects. But even back then, my suspicion was that if somebody nails you with a crossbow bolt, you're going to feel it, and it's probably going to take you down. Whereas in Dungeons and Dragons, well, you could fire that crossbow numerous times and whittle someone down. And yes, I get it. The concept of combat was that um, your armor class, your hit points, it's all um, a mechanic that's designed to replicate the ability of your character to withstand hits and to take hits and to not be hit. Um, so, Roger, all that. And believe me, that's just Nosh's off the top of his head at 11 p.m. on a Sunday night take on all this. So, you purists out there can certainly jump in. But when I saw this, something changed. In this game, I could see that a single crossbow bolt could pin a guy and pin him lethally and drop him. And so could a well placed sword stroke, so could a well placed hatchet blow. Um, and it could be to the arm, it could be to the leg, it could be the head, it could be to the face. So Steve Jackson's Man to Man really opened up for me at the time a world of tactical combat that I think I was really yearning for. I can also say that it's this game in particular that took me down the GURPS rabbit hole as a teenager, and I never looked back. And so I think for any of you who played this way back when, hopefully this will be bringing back some fresh memories of some awesome combats in your parents' basement. Um, and it may also remind you that, damn it, why did I ever pick up this book? Because it launched me into this game system, which I think is uh, my favorite, obviously, but also frustratingly never grew in the kind of popularity that I wish it would have grown into. Um, but such is life. So what I want to do today is to take you through the character sheet of one of these individuals, and this is a fellow by the name of Fiendish Friedrich, who you see here with the axe and the dagger. Let's just take a look at his character sheet and take a look at how it's different from, say, 4th edition. And we can also look at how things have evolved between 4th edition and, or from this to 4th edition. So here's the character sheet, and I've got some notes that I'm going to call up as well to sort of walk us through this. So first thing I'm going to do is just unlock this, and I'm going to reveal a few things. Okay, so the first thing is up here in the corner, which is the sequence box. So the box there allowed a player to track when their character acts in combat. And the move scores of the characters determine the sequence in which they take their turns. And from what I can tell, going over all my GURPS books from 1st and 2nd edition and 3rd edition, um, this would remain unchanged in 1st edition, 2nd edition, and 3rd edition. But it would be in 4th edition that a character's basic speed would determine the sequence in which um, characters act in combat. All right, so we'll take another look at something else here, which is the attributes box, or boxes. So curiously enough, there are only 4 attributes: strength, dexterity, intelligence, and health. Man-to-Man uses health to determine how many hits your character can take, and it uses strength to determine your fatigue points. This would continue unchanged through 1st edition, 2nd edition, and 3rd edition until 4th edition reversed these. All right, let's carry on around the character sheet. Let's take a look at fatigue and hits. Well, I guess I did explain that fatigue is taken from your strength and your hits taken are taken from your health. Okay, I don't think I had anything to add to that. No. Okay, sorry about that. Could have rolled that up in one comment. Let's take a look at movement down here. So basic speed, there's no change throughout the editions from Man-to-Man, 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, and 4th edition. Basic speed is created or generated by taking your health and your dexterity and divided by 4. So you can see here, however, though, that Fiendish Friedrich has a running skill of 13. And that actually increases Fiendish Friedrich's basic speed from 6.5 to 8.125. Now, this running rule, where this running skill would affect your basic speed, that rule continued through first edition and second edition and third edition, but was discontinued in fourth edition. And move, this calculation has remained unchanged throughout the editions. It's your basic speed minus your encumbrance. All right, let's carry on. So let's take a look at encumbrance, shall we? So from what I can read in comparing everything in the various editions, encumbrance here is calculated as a multiple of strength. So for Fiendish Friedrich, yeah, encumbrance, he's currently at heavy with all that he's carrying because he's got 81 pounds, and that takes him above the 72 for medium encumbrance, right into his heavy. So this would remain unchanged, how they calculate encumbrance in first edition, second edition, and third edition until fourth edition, when it would become a multiple of your basic lift. Okay, down we go. Passive defense. Fascinating. So, so in man-to-man and first edition, second edition, and third edition, your armor and shield provided a passive defense rating. A passive defense would be added to your active defense rolls. Some conditions applied, such as, for instance, your shield's passive defense would not help against a sneak attack, say, for instance, a hit from behind. But curiously, if you have any passive defense at all, a roll of 3 or 4 on your defense roll succeeds. So somehow, as they were imagining the combat system back then, it was this idea that this defense is passive. It's always defending you. It's always protecting you in some way or the other. And so even if you have 1 point of passive defense, a roll of 3 or 4 on your defense roll succeeds. Now, man-to-man had a basic combat system and an advanced combat system. So in the advanced combat system, a shield's passive defense only protected against the attacks from the front hexes and the shield side hex, which of course has carried on through all the additions in the tactical combat rules. So fourth edition would eliminate passive defense completely and create the defensive bonus instead, which typically would be provided by a shield, but could also be provided by magical spells and enchantments. Okay, let's carry on. Active defenses. Now, how might they be different from 4th edition today? Okay, so your active defenses, dodge, parry, block. Now, these 3 have remained your active defenses through man-to-man, 1st edition, 2nd edition, and they were calculated in this way. So your dodge equaled your move score. Your parry equaled your weapon skill divided by 2, and your block equaled your shield skill divided by 3. And of course, then you would add your passive defense onto those defense rolls. So for instance, with Fiendish here, if he was trying to dodge some attack, he would take the 5 and add the 7 for his defense roll target number. In 3rd edition, block changes to shield skill divided by 2, and again, plus the passive defense on top of that. In 4th edition, active defenses change in their calculation to dodge being your basic speed score plus 3 minus your encumbrance level. Parry is your weapon skill divided by 2 plus 3. And your block is your shield or cloak skill divided by 2 plus 3. And yes, if you have a shield, you can add the defensive bonus to your active defense. And across all editions, you, you drop the fractions. Okay, now jump on down to the next box here. So what we have here is your damage resistance. So damage resistance is the one thing that has remained unchanged through all the editions. You subtract your DR from any damage before calculating your final injury total. So that puppy has stayed the course over these 40 some years. All right, skills. Okay, so man to man only offers physical skills based on dexterity, and the skills are categorized as either easy, average, or hard. Now, for the physical skills, now in man to man, and then in first edition, second edition, and third edition, physical skills are categorized by the difficulty levels of easy, average, and hard. Um, but in all these editions, point costs for skills and their difficulties remain unchanged. And they also include the use of a half point cost for Dex -1 easy skills. Third edition would introduce half point costs for Dex -2 average and Dex -3 hard skills. Uh, there are no mental skills in man to man, they're just physical skills. First edition, second edition, and third edition would introduce mental skills ranging from easy to very hard and include half points for IQ -1 easy, IQ -2 average, and IQ -3 hard skills. In fourth edition, there's a reworking of all this. Fourth edition would do away with the distinction between physical and mental skills, opting for a governing attribute-based skill level across indexed with easy, average, hard, and very hard skill categories. And half point costs would be removed as well in fourth edition. All right, carrying on down the line here. Advantages. So in man to man, there are only 4 advantages, and there are no disadvantages. So you can have you can be ambidextrous, you can have combat reflexes, you can have peripheral vision, and you can have 1 or 2 levels of toughness. And it would be first edition, second edition, and third edition that would expand the advantages and then introduce disadvantages as a core concept of character creation. All right. Then we come down to weapons and possessions. So, yeah, look at this. I'm just going to put this up here, and you can take a look at the weapons and possession box right there. So in all editions, cutting and impaling damage types all share the same effects. So cutting damage is multiplied by 1.5, and impaling damage that gets through the armor is multiplied by 2. So without exhaustively comparing all weapons, man to man, first edition, second edition, and third edition all list sort of this framework for, say, an axe or a bastard sword thrusting. You'll note here that for the axe, you have to take a turn to ready it after every swing. So the idea of the axe being unbalanced wasn't just about using it to parry in the same turn that you use to attack. Okay. And you'll notice here for the bastard sword thrusting, it requires 1 turn to ready after a swing. And it also says here, this weapon becomes unready if used to parry. So they, I think, were fairly, what's the word? That was kind of penalized the use of the axe and the bastard sword in this way. In fourth edition, 4th edition removes the 1 turn to ready after a swing for both the axe and bastard sword, and adds a parry value of 0 with the U for unbalanced for both. Ranged weapons, however, are quite different. This requires a bit of explanation. So in 1st edition, 2nd edition, in man-to-man, weapon stats include such features as point-blank range, or PB, and increments, or INC. So point-blank range, or PB, is a value representing a range that at that range or less, your attack receives a +4 bonus. A missile weapon receives also a +1 to damage. But if you use your default skill with a thrown weapon, you don't get a 2-hit bonus. And then they have these things called range increments. So your effective skill drops by 1 at each of these increments. Or, you calculate your hit penalty as the number of range increments to the target, rounding down. So for instance, with the longbow, it does thrust +2 impaling damage. Its point blank range value is 5 yards. So at 5 yards or less, if you use a longbow, you're going to get a +4 bonus to your attack, and you should also get a +1 to the damage that you do if you hit. And your range increments are based on your strength. So if you have a strength value of 10, then your range increments are basically every 10 yards. That's how I understand that. And, and then of course the max damage an arrow can do is 1d +4. So when I do go into combat in another session, I'm going to be racking my brain trying to, calculate these range increments to represent the penalty towards the hit, the target number. But hey, that's how they rolled out ranged weapons in man-to-man, 1st edition and 2nd edition. In man-to-man, 1st edition, 2nd edition, and 3rd edition, the bow strength equaled the wielder's strength, except for crossbows. And reload rate varies. A crossbow that is of a wielder's strength or less takes 2 seconds to reload. A crossbow of 1 or 2 greater than the wielder's strength takes 6 seconds to reload, and a crossbow of strength 3 or 4 greater than the wielder's strength requires a goat's foot to reload. Interestingly enough, though, reload rate for bows remains unchanged in all editions. And this is going beyond man-to-man, but it's interesting that in 3rd edition, they introduce the concept of a snapshot and an accuracy bonus. And they still have the arrow only being able to do a certain max damage of 1d +4. But weapon stats change to include this snapshot, this SS, and the accuracy, or ACC, or AC. So in 1st edition, 2nd edition, and man-to-man, a snapshot occurs when you fire a missile without aiming. It incurs a -4 penalty to hit. But in 3rd edition, the -4 to hit penalty for a snapshot continues, but a ranged weapon now has this snapshot value. And if your adjusted to hit target number is greater than or equal to the snapshot value, so if it's greater than or equal to this value, you may fire without aiming and incur no -4 snapshot penalty. It's also in 3rd edition that you see the accuracy bonus introduced if the character takes at least 1 turn to aim. This continues in 4th edition. And in 4th edition, snapshot value and rule would be removed completely. The accuracy value and rule would be retained, but fourth edition will also introduce a bulk modifier value and a rule around the bulk modifier. Um, fourth edition also introduces the concept of a bow's strength as something that can stand alone unto itself versus assuming that the character's strength is the bow's strength. Okay, so that is kind of an overview of the character sheet and everything that was implied in that character sheet. Yeah. What else can I show you here? Well, would you like to take a look at one of the original maps? Okay, so here was the original, you could call it a dungeon map with some rooms and some basic black and white graphics, you know, published in 1985. Okay, and there was probably a couple of holes in the middle where you could put it into a binder or something. Okay, so this is what we had to play with. And we'd put our little cardboard characters on top of this thing and we'd move them around and we'd roll our dice on the real tabletop. And this is how we played man to man. Well, let's imagine what it would look like, though, today with a little bit of help from Fantasy Grounds. Let's just take a look if we were to add a bit of color to this. Look at that. And then what we could do is add the grid. Hey, and when I saw this, it's like, oh, I've somehow brought this thing to life in a new way. And if we wanted to throw some lighting in there, and if you take now a look at this map, you're going to go, hey, wasn't this the map he used for the wizard combat in the dungeon death match? It's precisely what I used. I used a man-to-map original map and just built over it. But there you go, friends. That's what a more modern-looking combat map could look like using the old map as a framework. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to man to man, and my plan is to walk you through a combat in the next session. So I thank you very much for watching.